Okay, so good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. I welcome you all to Feminist Spatial Practices International Solidarity, Lahore's event, which is organized by Women in Architecture Pakistan in collaboration with Department of Architecture, UT Lahore. And I'm really excited to start this event because we have been working on this for months. Ransker, my colleague here, we have been working on it. We had so many meetings on planning on deciding what will we do. A lot of things we could not do because of the current circumstances. Renske was supposed to be here in Pakistan, but for a lot of reasons, one most important reason was that our sponsors backed out because of this world scenario, and also because the security condition internationally is so bad that it's very difficult for everyone to internationally fly right now. So we decided to be resilient and not to postpone the event and continue with it in the best way possible. So that is why we are going with a hybrid mode. In the room with me, I have Dr. Zara Hussain, I have Dr. Nishat Awan, and I have a lot of my students. Some of them are still joining, but we should start now. So thank you so much, everyone who's online. Online, I have Dr. Manaza, who's the HOD Department of Architecture. I have Sana. I have Ishita joining from India. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And I will start by hearing a few words from the President, Women in Architecture Pakistan, Sana. So over to you, Sana.
Thank you so much, Maimuna. And you were completely right about the amount of work you and Renske have put in to bringing this event to life. I'd like to start with welcoming everyone on behalf of Women in Architecture Pakistan. I'm honored to welcome you all to Aurat or Sheher, which is an important chapter in the International Solidarity Event series, which is held in partnership with Feminist Spatial Practices. This gathering deliberately challenges established norms in architectural education and practice, advocating for a design philosophy that centers around the lived spatial needs and realities of women, while fostering a necessary sanctuary for research, dialogue, and collaboration. I think by linking our local experiences in Lahore with the wider international feminist discourse, we move beyond just simply discussing spaces to actively reclaiming them. This effort has only been made possible through the commitment of our convener, Dr. Maimuna Iqbal, and the valued vision and collaboration of Dr. Renske Maria Van Dam, who is the co-founder of Feminist Spatial Practices. I would also like to thank Dr. Munazza for always being very supportive of women in architecture Pakistan and always being an active partner and collaborator throughout all our events. We are also honored to have Dr. Nishat Awan with us, who will be delivering the keynote. And I'd also like to extend our sincere thanks to our panelists and all the participants that are contributing to this perspective. As we begin, I encourage you to engage thoughtfully with the ideas shared, and I hope this event inspires new ways of thinking and a renewed commitment to shape more inclusive and equitable cities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sana, for your very encouraging words. And of course, this is a team effort. So everyone from WAP is together to bring these such events forward. And we are committed towards bringing the idea of feminist speciality, gender, and the built environment forward in the landscape of architecture in Pakistan, but also whenever we can on the international context. Now, I would like to request Dr. Munazza Akhtar, Chairperson, Department of Architecture at UT Lahore, to say a few words, please.
Thank you so much, Maimuna. It's a real pleasure for me to welcome you all to the Department of Architecture at UT Lahore for Women and the City. part of the International Solidarity Initiative. This is an important and timely conversation that invites us to think more critically about the relationship between gender and the built environment. As a department, we're nearly 70% of our students and faculty are women. We strongly believe that architecture is never neutral. It shapes how people access spaces, the opportunities they have, and their everyday experiences. So it's important that we continue to question, reflect, and rethink the way we design our cities. Today's event is very much in line with our commitment to inclusive, research-led, and socially responsive design thinking. Bringing together both local and international voices, it creates a great opportunity for dialogues, exchange of ideas, and collectively imagining more equitable urban futures. Sorry. I would like to acknowledge and thank Women in Architecture Pakistan, its president, Sana Numan, and thanks to Dr. Nishad, Dr. Zara, Dr. Renske, and all collaborators for making this possible. A special thanks to our faculty member, Dr. Memuna Iqbal, also Vice Chair of AP, for organizing this event at our department. I think it's also quite pleasing for me to know that both our undergraduate and graduate students will be attending this event. It's wonderful because engaging with these conversations early on is so important. I hope you all find the discussions enriching and thought-provoking, and they stay with you beyond today as well. Thank you so much, and welcome to the department.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Your presence is always very encouraging for me personally, as well as for the Women in Architecture Pakistan. And UIT is my home as well. It's very close to my heart. So, and similar is the WAP. So bringing the two together is a big privilege for me. Thank you so much. So now I would like to ask Dr. Renske, who is my partner from FSP, Feminist Spatial Practices. Actually, this whole thing started with Renske thinking that let's do something on the international level. And then one fine day, I received an email from her. We were in touch before for something else, but that couldn't happen. So one fine day, I received an email from her, and she said, "We are thinking about doing something like this. Are you interested?" And I jumped on the opportunity. Like, of course, I'm interested. Let's do it. So thank you so much, Renske, for always being there, for your support. And please go ahead with introducing international solidarity. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for these kind words and for your participation in this project. So I will tell a little bit about feminist spatial practices and the International Solidarity Project. And for that, I made a short presentation. So I will share my screen. Can everybody see this now? Yes, I see nodding, so that's good. Yeah, so I'm speaking today from the Netherlands, from The Hague, and I am an artist.
We see your screen. We don't see the presentation.
Oh,
We see the desktop.
sorry. Let's change that for a moment. Is this better?
Something is coming up. Yes.
Okay,
We can
perfect.
see.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. Yeah, so I was saying I'm talking to you from The Hague, the Netherlands. I am an architect and artist and researcher, and also the co-chair of the Feminist Spatial Practices International Solidarity Working Group. We have made a habit of starting these kind of events with an opening statement in which we honor and celebrate the diverse intergenerational feminist activism and knowledge on which we are building and organizing today. For us, feminism goes beyond pursuits of gender equity. It's advocating for all with whose lived experiences are marginalized due to hierarchies of powers and privilege. And in this long intergenerational change process, I'm acknowledging my own role, and I also invite you to acknowledge your own and each other's position and role as a collective working across geographies and times. So, what is feminist spatial practices? Just to give you a small update for people that are not yet familiar with our work. We are a global collective of architects, artists, designers, scholars that celebrate the diverse ways of working towards intersectionality, gender equity in the built environment. We organize workshops, lecture series, creative projects, and foster in this way an international community of thinkers, advocates, and activists and makers with any background or gender and identification to support each other. Here you see an image of one of the events we organized in New York, where often we invite spatial practitioners from different kind of fields to share their practice and their perspective on gender equity in the built environment. So our core values are, on the one hand, bringing together feminist spatial practices from around the world, celebrating the diversity of ways that feminism is practiced, recognizing the complex and intersectional inequalities that exist due to hierarchies of power and privilege, advocating for all who those most affected by hierarchies of power, welcoming people of any gender and sexual identity to engage with feminism and our community, centering care, equity, and co-creation in spatial practices, and also very important, cultivating participatory and reciprocal practices in our organization and within the community. And I very much feel that this international solidarity project belongs to these core values. So here you see another image from the moment when we launched our platform. Because besides our programming, Feminist Spatial Practices maintains an interactive online archive that highlights, promotes, and shares feminist practices in art, design, architecture, and activism. And this online platform for us is a medium for community building and offers an interactive visualization and searchable index of global practices around the world. So this all started with an initiative by the founders of Feminist Spatial Practices, Brian E. Roberts and Adrian and Aiken, because they started to map from their own interest and from their own curiosity to feminist practices around the world. They start to make a huge diagram collecting different practices. And as you can see in this image, they started to map this around 6 different themes: experimental pedagogies, expanded histories, embodied theories, political struggles, collaborative practices, spaces for non-conforming bodies, and alternative materialities. And if I can share from my own perspective, this was when I saw this diagram, this was one of the first moments I thought, oh, I'm actually very much interested in the feminist perspective. Because it's not only about putting forward the lived experience of the female perspective or the woman perspective, but it is also very much about feminist spatial values in design practice. And how then does it look like? And how then does the practice actually change? And for me, this diagram, and with all the tiny practices mapped on it, was the first time I thought, oh, I belong to this field of transformative practices. And in this way, maybe we can change building culture. So based on this diagram, we made this interactive, searchable website. I think it has, so as you could see, this is the design of this. And if you visit the website, you can actually zoom into it, and all the little squares present one of our mapped practices. You can also go through the index, where you can actually, in a more traditional way, go through all the practices that are mapped there. And every practice has a little explanation on it and a link to the website or the project that you want to explore. You can use all the themes, but also search on countries, search on themes in different ways, and what kind of project there is. So if you have not visited the website, please do so, and feel free to explore and use this in your own studies. Then, the Feminist Spatial Practices International Solidarity Project. After we had launched the archive, we felt like, specifically I felt like, I would like to actually connect more to the people that work on the ground. We have now mapped them all in the archive, but what about starting a conversation? And what about actually exchanging our knowledge and working together? And from this, the International Solidarity Practices program emerges. And our main aim is to nurture exchange between the feminist spatial practices worldwide through highlighting and connecting events organized by local partners, such as the Lahore event these 2 days. Together we work in a working group, and from here we can exchange spirit and knowledge from one context to the other, translating local realities. And this is one of the things that makes me most excited, to actually engage with you and learn from the practices that you are working with out there. So I'm very excited about the coming 2 days. So we have a sequence of local gatherings mapped out. We started in Delft and now we're in Lahore. And this is not in the order as it will appear, but along the way we will hopefully continue to go across the world, sharing and exchanging knowledge. So as I said, we started in Delft and now today we are in Lahore. And I won't tell as much about the Delft event because Mamuma was also there, and later on she will share a little bit about what we did there and our experiences there. What I want to say as last, to frame a little bit what we're doing in a larger context, is that together we're aiming to work towards a feminist spatial practices toolkit. And as we were working together and starting to organize the events, we realized that lots of us were focused on embodied, artistic, creative practices to actually exchange and share our knowledge. In Delft, we started making or using textile to craft a protest banner, which resulted in a very creative group of people knitting and working together while we were talking about international solidarity and the feminist values. So, we changed a little bit the traditional academic culture where we just sit in tables or talk to each other in this way, but we started to integrate way more embodied and artistic practices to activate these conversations. In the USA, before we have crafted poofs. So this was not only a workshop where we exchanged our perspectives on feminist spatial practices, but also started to craft the environment we are actually working in together. So we use these poofs, for example, for the launch of our interactive platform, where we, in a very subtle way, already start to make points about, maybe the spaces we live in need different experiences and need to be designed in different ways. For another example, in Slovakia, in Bratislava, they started to organize their events around dinners. where while you're sharing food together, you also have conversations about specific feminist themes, as they would call it, the discursive dinner. And then just to add one example that is very relevant to Lahore, we see the spatial justice walk, as you're going to do in the coming days, also as part of this larger way of exchanging feminist spatial practices and knowledge sharing together. So we're hoping eventually to develop all these creative tools in the same way as we did with the mapping station. At a certain time, we were thinking about the interactive web platform we have, and we developed a local mapping station for it. As you can see it here, it was actualized in Belgium, where people started to add practices from the Belgian perspective to it, and we make a booklet for it. And we could imagine that all the different tools we are developing right now could also develop in this kind of booklets, so we can even easier share it across the world. But we will also see what comes out of it, and what the conversations we have together will actually, what kind of seeds grow out from it, and what we will develop together from there. So last but not least, I wanted to just mention the people that are involved in the International Solidarity Working Group. I have been very happy with this group, growing together and talking and exchanging, and I'm very much looking forward to developing this together. And then I will give the word back to Mamona.
Thank you so much, Renske, for introducing the FSP initiative very well, and the international solidarity as well. And we are looking forward to expand, and hopefully after Lahore, we'll have a lot more other events as well. I will take 1 minute break because I have to download something. Okay. Okay. Okay, I think it will be happening in the background. Meanwhile, I can share my screen. Renske, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. It's not on full screen.
Oh yeah, I am trying to do that. Yes. Oh, how do I make this go away? Yeah. So, can you hear me well?
Yeah, we can still see your notes also.
Oh, okay. Why is that?
I think you have to click on another.
Just a second.
Is it not the sign like right in the right corner? Oh.
You can still see my notes?
Yeah.
On those 3 dots, Mamona, if you click on hide presenter view, just go on the 3 dots. Hide presenter view.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you. Thank
Now
you,
I
Jutta.
thank you, Sana. Now I can't see my notes as well, but it's fine. I'll make it work. No issues. Okay, so we'll talk about. I'll take it from where Renske actually finished. That she talked about what feminist special practices is and what international solidarity is, and now we can talk about the event in Pakistan. So basically, Women and City, the event is creates a platform for dialogue across local and international context, foregrounding how power, access, and exclusion are embedded in everyday urban experiences. Through keynote, panel discussion, and reflections from practice and pedagogy, the event aims to challenge dominant spatial narratives while amplifying diverse voices and lived realities. So this is situated in Lahore, but yet connected through global solidarity. The event emphasizes the importance of collaborative, research-led, and practice-based approaches to reimagining more equitable urban futures. It positions feminist special practices not only as a critical framework, but as an active tool for transforming how cities are understood, designed, and inhabited. And these are some important points that were the core values or the core belief system on which we designed this event. Feminism in special practices represents a fundamental challenge to centuries of male-dominant design thinking that has shaped our built environment in ways that often exclude, marginalize, or inadequately serve women and other marginalized groups. This goes beyond merely increasing women's participation in existing structure. It questions what constitutes legitimate architecture knowledge, legitimate architecture knowledge, who gets to make decisions about public spaces and how buildings can support or hinder gender equity. Architecture and urban planning are inherently political act and determine who has access to resources, safety, mobility, and agency. Pakistan represents a particularly critical case given its severe gender inequality challenges, ranking second last in the Global Gender Equality Index. We see these surveys coming up every year, and Pakistan is performing badly every year. With systematic exclusion affecting women's economic participation and professional advancement, the country's built environment offers reinforced gender segregation and limits women mobility and access to public spaces. In Pakistan's context, feminist spatial practice isn't just about professional equity. It's about creating spaces that serve a population where women face severe restrictions on mobility, economic participation, and public life. So these are the conceptual backgrounds on which we have developed this whole event. And these are the thoughts and reflections that I want my students who are here to think about while we move on to the next activities. And as has already introduced this, I won't spend much time on it. This whole initiative is part of international solidarity by feminist special practices. We hope we started from Delft like almost a month ago on the occasion of International Women's Day. And then now we're in Lahore. We hope to go in many more places. One very important aspect of this event is called the pollinators. So when we were designing this event, we realized that not everyone can be everywhere, of course, and we are designing this on the international global level. So how we can connect these different events, different local gatherings, and how to connect them. So we came up with the idea of pollinators, where one person who can feasibly travel to one venue will go there. They will observe, they will participate in the event, they will bring their own experiences to the next event. So I was a pollinator at the Delft event, and I will share my experiences based upon that. And Jessica was supposed to be the pollinator for this event. Unfortunately, she could not be here, but she's available online. She's here, of course, and then we'll provide all the materials and all the insights from the event to her. So as I said, I went to Delft as a pollinator. I saw the city for the first time. It was amazing. I went to the Department of Architecture. I met some amazing people. This picture in the middle seemed very informal, but it's very important because these are the people who this is a team that is working on international solidarity. Not everyone is here, but everyone who could be there. So we decided to connect, and we had a walk through the city. And then when we reached the Department of Architecture, we were very happy to see this screen, the first advertisement or the first introduction of the event within the building. And so this was the introduction of the international, the first Delft event on the TU Delft's website. It was actually the part of a BK Feminist Week that happens in TU Delft that started in 2025. This was the second year. And in my notes, I had somewhere written what BK means, but I forgot. But I don't remember it by heart.
It means bouwkunde, which is architecture in Dutch.
Yes. Bouwkunde, yeah? Yeah, so which means architecture in Dutch. I had it in my notes, but I could not see them now. Anyhow, so this was the event, and then the event was for the whole week. But at the end of the week, we had this feminist leadership lunch where people, and this was a lovely lunch. We not because of the food. Was lovely as well, but because there were so many people from across Europe who belong to different feminist organizations, and then we were all on a table, and we could first introduce ourselves, the agendas we are working on, the organizations we belong to, organizations do, and then we talked about what to do next. What should be our next actions for international solidarity, but also for in generally feminist and architecture, feminism in architecture. And after that, we had this workshop called Sowing Solidarity. Renska also talked about it just now. This was organized by a Mexican craftswoman and textile artist called, her name is Diane Soto Vega. So she kind of organized and she told us what to do. And it started with the breathing exercise and to be present in the moment and to be connected to the space where we were, and just forgetting everything, just forgetting about everything else in the world and just being present in the moment. So, and then the actual exercise started. So the idea was to create a feminist banner, which will identify different slogans, which will show different slogans. And on every table, we were asked to decide on a slogan. And then we had to somehow stitch the patches that in our perception represent that slogan. We could write something, we could make something. It was very open-ended, it was very easy. We could ask for fabric, we could ask for threads, for beads, anything we would like to work with. And the whole idea was actually, so as we were sitting on a table, the whole idea was to have discussion with our fellow feminist special practice practitioners, and then whatever we are reflecting upon, sewing that into a piece of fabric. And this is what we did. These are some examples of the patches that were created. And at our table, the slogan that we decided was freedom. So everyone who was at the table started stitching that slogan into their own language. So I made this Azadi, and then you can see one here in Arabic, and then I think there was one in Turkish. So everyone made their own pieces of fabric, and then we all took it to the main big piece of fabric, the banner, and we with the help of an iron, we sew it all together in this banner. So this banner is actually a feminist resistance banner, and this was the outcome of it. And the outcome was very interesting because this was not just a piece of fabric. So in this act of collective making, stitching becomes more than a craft. This is my reflection upon what we did. It operated as a method of spatial and critical inquiry. Each fragment of fabric carried lived experiences, and as participants assembled them, they were not simply producing a banner, but negotiating meaning of visibility, resistance, and belonging. So as we were stitching, we were talking, we were discussing where we are coming from, what are the struggles that we face in our practices, what are the ideas that we want to take further, and how we all connect with each other, but how we are different, and how we can support each other. The process disrupted conventional hierarchies of knowledge by centering embodied tactile practices, where making, thinking, and dissent unfold simultaneously. Through this slow collaborative labor, the banner emerged as a material archive or feminist agency, where threads did not just connect cloth, but wove together voices, struggles, and solidarities across contexts. So after this banner was handed over to me to bring to this event, and we'll have this in our studio tomorrow. I didn't bring it today because I really want to be very careful with it. So tomorrow we'll have it on the wall, and then you can all see it, and then you can all reflect upon it. What do you think about it? What do you learn, or what questions do you have when you look at it, and how do you think it connects to your idea of feminism in architecture? After this exercise, we had the opening ceremony for the International Solidarity. Here you can see Renske talking about the whole event. And then I explained the next event, Aurat or Sheher, which we're having now. I explained what we'll be doing in Lahore. And these are some of the posters. So this is a team of the International Solidarity. These are all the people who are working so far on this initiatives. And on the other side, you can see the organizing committee from WAP. These are my colleagues who are always there to support all the initiatives, and also they're part of the initiative as well. And now after this, we'll have the keynote by Dr. Nashat Awan, who's here. And after her keynote, we'll have another talk by Dr. Zahra, me, and Madam Nabha. So this is a reflection from a studio that we did last year, which was very similar to the activity we are going to do today and tomorrow. So that is why we decided to have some reflection from the studio from the last year. And after that, we'll have two panel discussions. One is going to happen today, Whose Space, Whose City. Dr. Zahra Hussain will be moderating that. And then we'll have one panel discussion tomorrow that will be based upon the activity that we are going to do, the spatial justice walk and the mapping exercise. And we have wonderful panelists joining us online. And of course, Dr. Nishat Awan, who's here, will also be joining today's panel. And then today, at the end of the day, we'll have the spatial justice walk. And all of you who are here will be divided in 3 groups, and you'll be given 3 sites, and you'll go there and you'll make some observations. We'll share with you what kind of observations you have to do, and we'll give you a handout as well. I haven't put any picture here because you have to bring the pictures for me to put here later on. And also we'll have detailed discussion on that later on. But the activity of Spatial Justice Walk will start today, and tomorrow we'll work on the mapping exercise. And those maps will be the next takeaway for the next event. So these maps are not going to just stay here. I'm going to send those to Netherlands, and hopefully Renske will go to the next event and she'll take those there. So we have to be very careful what and how we are going to represent our city, and how we have to represent very graphically in a very mature manner. So that is it from my side for now. So I think we are going ahead of time. So Renske, what do you think? Should we start keynote, or should we start it on that decided time and take a 15 minutes break? Sorry, you're mute.
What works for you?
What do you think?
Maybe there are questions from the room to us already, but
Do you have any questions? No, I knew it. So I think let's start on the decided time so that because we have advertised that it's online, so if anyone wants to join, they should be joining at the exact time. So, okay, let's take a 10 minutes break then, and then we'll start with the keynote.
yes, thank you.
Okay. So this is the second email, right?
Natively small application इसको करना है. This will be better.
बस ठीक है कर लेते हैं. Thank you. So, जल्दी और दरवाजा बंद करो. Okay, now we would like to move to the next part of this event. And we have our keynote, Dr. Nishad Awan here. She is a professor of architecture and visual culture at UCL Urban Laboratory, working across architecture, art, and the social sciences on issue of migration, borders, and spatial representation. Her research explores diasporas, displacement, and digital mapping practices, and includes inter and diasporic agencies. We are very pleased and feel honored that she's here with us today. So I would like Dr. Nishad Awan to come to us.
Equally. Sorry, just a. Oh, it's not shared.
It's not shared, yeah.
I'll do that. शेयर कर दे.
Normally, I have seen कि entire कर दो तो बेहतर रहता है. Renske, can you see the screen?
Yes, it's not full screen yet, but yes. Yes, perfect.
It's coming. Oh, it should be coming. No? It's filming.
Okay, thank you very much. It's really nice to be here. So yeah, speak a little bit about my work, which, as Mamuna said, is about kind of the relationship between speak directly about feminism, but I think what I take from feminism is
Sorry, we got disconnected. Can you hear us?
Yes, now we can hear you again.
Okay, thank you so much.
okay, फिर वो शेयर.
Yeah. No, I'm doing it.
Hyper design. Okay, so I don't know how much you heard online, but I was just saying that my work is about architecture and migration. And although I'm not going to talk about feminism directly, what I take from feminist practice is how you sort of relate to communities and people that are kind of marginalized. How do you think with architecture through those methods or through those ways of how do you kind of think about architecture? I've lost my thread. So with communities that are marginalized, but also how you kind of use architectural methods to work with those kinds of communities and spaces. So my work started with questions around diaspora and architecture. So people who've moved to another place are making a home in a new place. I was living in London at the time, and I looked at the Turkish and Kurdish, so Kurd community in London. And I guess a lot of the work that looks at diaspora is through kind of domestic spaces, right? How people make a home in a new place. But I was interested in how were kind of changing the city itself, right? And making home within the city, in the street, etc. And then later on, my work changed to forced migration and refugeehood. And that was really from working with the Kurdish community, who, as you might know, are the largest stateless group in the world. And so a lot of the people that I was talking to in London, they had come to London as refugees, as kind of, people who had fled the conflict, and especially southeastern Turkey. And so there I became really interested in forced migration and refugeehood. But all of that work, which has spanned over 10 years now, interest has always been in this notion of unsettlement. So when you move to a new place, however you have, whatever the reasons are for you to move, this feeling of unsettlement, and then how you begin to make home. And so when you start thinking about unsettlement in architecture, you find out quite quickly that things are a little difficult, because architecture is very much a kind of subject that is related to questions of settlement, right? So if we think about traditional idea of architecture, it's about people staying in one place, making a home, making a city, and slowly architecture comes. So if we think of it from the notion, let's say the European side of things, right? This is a kind of old essay by somebody called Laugier, where, he speaks about architecture as a primitive hut, right? That's the standard sort of Eurocentric, let's say, but idea of where architecture comes from. If we think about it more closer to home, right? We might think about somewhere like this. This is Harappa, right? So now we're thinking on a much longer scale here about the archaeological record, one of the kind of first urban civilizations, right? And here again, architecture is understood to be connected to ideas of agriculture, right? You sort of settle down, learn farming practices, and make cities. And so there's been this argument that there is a relationship between architecture and settlement, but also with civilization, right? Civilization is connected to the notion of settlement. But these questions are beginning to be, these ideas are beginning to be questioned a little bit. So a really kind of influential book that was published recently was by two sort of, and David Graeber, who's an anthropologist, the late David Graeber, and David Wengrow, who's an archaeologist. And in this book, there are some problematic things in it, but what's really interesting about it is that they're sort of saying that there is a kind of marginal history to human civilization that is not necessarily connected to this idea of settlement. And so they speak about the fact that, if there are other ways of living on the earth that are much more gentler, that are much, that don't kind of leave the kinds of traces that we see in places like Harappa, right? So if you're not building big cities, you don't leave a trace. And so what they're really talking about is this other marginalized kind of story of human civilization. And this book is very much about political thinking as well. So they're also thinking about different politics to the one that we know already. So I find this interesting because I think it questions the very basis of architecture, much as feminism once did, right? It questioned how traditional architecture has been kind of understood and, through embodied spatial practices. So here we're thinking about how traditional architecture can be re-understood through ideas of other kinds of kind of inhabitation on the planet. So one really obvious example would be this. This is an image of the Amazon forest. So there's a lot of work that's being done recently through, not just in the Amazon, but across the world where there are kind of indigenous groups in Pakistan as well. Zara does this work a lot, thinking with kind of more indigenous local groups who have been living in one place for a long time and whose kind of, whose way of living on the planet is much more light touch. So it's a more ephemeral way of thinking about architecture. And Paulo Tavares is an architect who's been working a lot with the indigenous communities of the Amazon. And one of the things that comes out of this work, and it's not just him, it's others as well, that, the Amazon, which we consider to be this pristine forest, right, this beautiful forest that has not been touched, it's actually a cultivated landscape. For generations, indigenous groups have, made clearings in the forest. They have done controlled burnings, certain kinds of growing and cultivation practices that have produced this managed landscape that is in harmony with what nature was doing. So very different, I guess, from, our context all across the world. So this book, A World of Many Worlds, is very much talking about, it's coming from anthropology, but it's talking about a kind of more indigenous perspective on the world. So what does all this have to do with architecture and what I started my conversation with, which was around ideas of forced migration? Well, one of the things, when I started looking at forced migration, again, it was right around sort of, less than 10 years ago. But when I really started my current project of thinking about about refugees, it was the time of the Syrian crisis, after the kind of the revolution and the civil war that ensued, and a lot of people were moving to Europe, especially from Syria. And there was a lot of kind of response by architects finally on this question that had been ignored for a long time. But the response was what you can see on the right-hand side. It was about emergency. It was about shelter, right? We need to provide homes and shelter really quickly. But of course, the idea when somebody moves quite quickly from a place, it's not just that emergency response they need, it's a kind of longer trajectory of kind of unsettlement. And so there was this kind of mismatch between, just providing an emergency response to what was really required, which was a longer term engagement. And then on the other side, what you can see, especially with this book, Arrival City, which is written by a Canadian author, is the other kind of, especially in the global north, right? I'm talking from the perspective of the global north here, the kinds of ways in which kind of architecture and, the general discourse sort of dealt with migration was through this idea of, well, all these people are coming, how do we integrate them, right? So there was definitely from the south, people are coming to the north, and so how do we kind of think about integration? So ethically, kind of difficult, They may speak about solidarity, but half the time there's no solidarity. So for me, this was kind of difficult, and these were the things that I was sort of trying to work against, I suppose, in my work. And one of the things that I realized was that a lot of this was about a question of representation. A lot of this was a question of what kinds of stories are we telling in order to come to these kinds of conclusions. And we know, as you know, from the kind of work that you're going to do in the next couple of days, that for architecture, one of the main tools of representation that we have especially when we move beyond the built object, is mapping, right? It's kind of forms of drawing and mapping, trying to understand spatial relations. So for me, I had to go all the way back to that to try to understand, well, how can we rethink our practices of representation and mapping? This is all work, actually, I don't know why I put it in here, but it's there. This is the work that in the book Diasporic Agencies, the Kurdish and Turkish community that I was speaking about. And here, this work is really trying to think about, how to understand space. This is a very standard question. Do you get some shots for that? But within this, there is this one space that a lot of the Kurdish groups use when people first arrive. And I was trying to understand, well, if the physical space is so simple, what is it about the space that makes it so special for the Kurdish community? And of course, it is the social networks. It's the, relationships that are made through this space, and this mapping the kind of groups are somehow speaking about the social networks and the kind of ephemeral relations and embodied relations that really make up a space, right? Because space is never an empty container, as Lefebvre said, it's made of social connections, etc. So if we come back to kind of forced migration, and remember I said that a lot of the question is about representation, right? How do we change our representational practices? The standard representation of migration, both in the north and the south, this is from Dawn, is this, right? It's kind of arrows. The top ones are especially bad, I think. They're from maps that were made by Frontex, which is the European Border Agency. So all the people, especially Pakistanis included, who are kind of drowning in the Mediterranean because the ships are not being rescued, the fault is Frontex's. So Frontex makes these maps, and you can see what the arrows are doing, starting somewhere nondescript in the south, right? Somewhere on the African continent, somewhere in Asia, or pointing like invaded armies to Europe. And so there is, this is an edited document. It doesn't tell the whole story. There's huge migrations happening within the continent of Africa, also within regions in Asia that these maps don't show. So there are political arguments. And so therefore, my feeling was that we needed to kind of, fight this kind of, a lot has been written and not And then there's these other maps which are slightly better, but again, they are kind of reducing migration to a series of arrows, to a series of routes that are being kind of followed. And really, these maps somehow silence what I would say is a migrant experience, the experience of crossing borders. And I suppose the point is not necessarily to expect maps to represent migration more accurately. It's not that, I don't think. It's more that we have to ask, how can these maps hold that which is usually left out? Because maps are always one-sided. They're always telling a story. Maps are arguments, right? So when you go to do certain maps in your spatial justice walk, you will be making certain arguments about the city, probably from a feminist perspective. And so how to make those kinds of arguments for migration is something that I was thinking about. So beyond just the roots, right? And so I started doing a lot of kind of interviews. This is quite old, this work. This is a group of Pakistani men that I met sort of outside the consulate in Istanbul. And they were just kind of, I asked them to draw a map, so you can see them. It's a video, so they speak about where and what they've done. And, they're talking, and they're kind of around, making fun of them, asking them to draw, etc. And eventually this guy who's narrating the story saying, I'm kind of sick of this, another person goes, why are you sick of this? Don't you want to go to Europe? Don't you want to see Europe? And this goes, Pakistan, right? So this is hell, please send us back to Pakistan. So a very different kind of thinking, a very different perspective from those kinds of maps that are in one way. And in fact, the experience is something that is negated from the other map. So we've been kind of working together. You can see Zara there too. It's a big team that we worked together a while ago. This project is now finished. It's called Topological Atlas, and a lot of us work together on this project to really think about these issues of mapping and representation, but also how to kind of think about the experience of migration in a different way. So this was a project that was very much kind of bringing together anthropology, ethnographic research methods, lots of interviews, talking to people, workshops, community-based workshops, others, and then trying to see how that material can be brought together in a way that we can really begin to account for some of the stories that we were hearing. So as I say, ethnography of migration. So I spent a lot of time in the beginning of the project. I spent a lot of time here. Can you guess where this is? It's in your country, obviously. Karachi, exactly. This is East Coast bus station in Karachi. Spent a lot of time here, hanging out, talking to people. And it's a place where, a lot of people start their journey westward, and the ones that are going on foot, trying to cross the Iran border through Turkey onwards, perhaps. And what's interesting about this place, we spoke about it as a place of intensity, I think, Zara. What's interesting about places like this is that there might be a very, Hame the standards bus station, we feel like it's a standard bus station, but it's a place where so many things come together. It's a place where the clandestine movement of people overlaps with the kind of movement of goods, right? So Iran se jo diesel aa raha hai, Iran se jo cheezein aa rahi hain. And it's a place where different jurisdictions overlap as well. So I spent a long time talking to the State, the bus ke adde mein jo log kaam karte the, just trying to understand who are the actors that are helping this place to work. Other work that we did was very much closer to the Pakistan-Iran border. So this is near Charlie. And this is a place again where oil comes in from Iran. And here, there's a whole other kind of course, a different political situation, a different kind of landscape. It is a place where, dust storms are used as a way to kind of hide, right? When people are trying to cross the border. So the kind of environment becomes a kind of agent within the crossing of the border, right? It's a place where, many other things are happening that I'm sure you know of. I don't need to tell you. So the movement of people overlaps with the movement of other things as well. And so if we're thinking about kind of the crossing of borders, we had to think about, well, what was happening at the border. And this was one of the main things that came out of the project, was that if we want to understand the movement of people across borders, we also need to understand what's happening in the communities, right? Because often borders are kind of borders are securitized. It means that Some people are living on one side of the border, maybe the graves are around on the other, maybe the graves of their relatives are on the other side. And so the fence that's built splits communities that have been living easily across the border. And so all of these questions became part of the project, which initially we had, thought really simply was a project about people towards Europe from Pakistan. So all this to say that when you do work that is very grounded in a particular place, when you try to think about the embodied situation of various communities, etc., questions that you came with open up, right? You come with a certain idea and then you realize, oh my God, something else is happening here. I didn't realize. And so you have to completely rechange again. And this is part of the process of this kind of embedded research. And the other work that we did, this was with Lajver, the organization that Zara runs, and we did these kinds of workshops with the Mahidi, with the fisher folk community in Gavado. You probably recognize the Hammerhead Peninsula. And this again had another kind of aspect to it where we were thinking about how the infrastructure development, CPEC, वगैरह से जो development area, how is it changing the lives of the Mahigir? And Zara especially was interested in the kind of local indigenous knowledge that was kind of embedded within these places with the people there. So we did a lot of mapping exercises. And for me, the interest was, well, how does this kind of world, which almost seems separated out, how does this intersect and become entangled with the movement of people? So there was a series of different things that we were looking at from our own different perspectives. One of the kind of PhDs that was associated with the project, his name is Asim Rafiki, and he carried on some of this work of trying to understand how the local communities, they sort of what Gavada was like for them. Because we're normally used to seeing that Hammerhead Peninsula in the estate agents kind of images. But actually, there's small little places that are incredibly important both for going out fishing, but also better, वहाँ पे है, लोग वहाँ पे जाके, they have picnics, etc. There's a whole life that's lived along the cliffs of Gavada that is being raised through the development. And so some of that work of kind of documenting it, Asim has done in his PhD. And then Asim is also a photographer, so he's had a whole career as a photojournalist, and he did a series of these kinds of staged photographs, which I don't need to explain to you, right? They tell a certain story about the relationship between development, the breakdown of ecology, the debris of a certain kind of right? And what happens to the lives of those who are left out of it. So again, I think, I want to say something here about feminism and feminist practice. I mean, these are all men, obviously we spoke to men, right? But I think the approach of kind of trying to consider how marginalized groups are affected by large-scale power relations is a feminist approach. Feminists were the first to think about space in that way. And so that's why I think my work is feminist, in case you're wondering what I'm on about. This is a really lovely map that Zara made. Is an artist. And, again, this is another perspective on Gawada. So you can see they're all very different maps, different ways of representing. Each one is showing Gawada through a different lens. And here it's about the kind of other worlds that are kind of, I'm not going to speak for you, Zara, but, it is trying to understand Gawada through the kind of non-human relations, just stories, Gawada is like this. These are the spaces that are important to us. Those are kind of, embedded within this drawing. So yeah, I think on top of that, so that was kind of very embedded ethnographic work that we did. And then parallel to that, we were doing the kind of legal geography of borders. Because, if you're crossing borders we know are made, of course, of fences, of lines in the sand, right? Walls that are being built all the time. But borders are also made through bureaucracies, right? You need a passport to cross. You need a visa, you need a permit, ID card. We know all of this. And so if we want to understand how borders operate, we have to understand what the legal geography is, right? And so we spent a lot of time in court archives trying to understand what was happening to the people being deported back, that were caught at the border. Unki zindagi kya hai? Unke saath kya hota hai? Where do they go? What fines are they being paid? What is the procedure? Because I think all of that is also related to architecture. And then the other thing that we were doing was trying to really understand what the border was like. So we found out when we were doing this work, especially with other but in the kind of northern part of the Iran border as well, that सब कहते हैं, "Oh, fence bun me, a fence bun me." No one knew where the fence was. And so we did spend a long time trying to, I mean, I don't show this. Whatever. This is a very small amount of the map, but we were trying to work out, has the fence actually been built? Where has it been built? Because it's not actually on the borderline, and it changes in various spaces. So we were trying to understand that in relation to the different legal jurisdictions that operate within this area, right? Because, legal jurisdiction is to do with these things, right? It's to do with where the checkpoints are. It's to do with who you are determines where you can go in a highly securitized space. And so you have to understand where the boundaries are. And some of that work we also did as a way to understand what the border was really like, because the border is never a line on the sand. It is a very thick kind of space that is made up of a series of relationships. What else can I say? So yeah, with that, so since we're talking about representation, it's probably the last slide to talk about, but how do you represent a legal border is a good question, right? You can try to do it like this, what we did, try to understand where the checkpoints, where is the line of, where is the no man's land, where is the kind of space, etc. But on the other hand, I think you could understand where the line is through understanding how a person crosses it, right? If I don't have a piece of paper that's required to cross a particular line, when I come up to it, I'm going to find out very soon because somebody's going to ask me to show them that the ID card, right? And so what we did in this particular representation was we took many of the interviews that we did with people who had crossed borders without papers and asked, and they were really long interviews, hours long. So each of these columns is one interview, and all we did was we just listed all the names, places of names, all the names of places that they mentioned. So as it says in here, a list of places mentioned during interviews in order of appearance, a journey in itself. And as you look at it, I'm sorry you can't really read it, but if you read it here, it goes Turkey, Iran, Turkey, Iran, Turkey, Tehran, Yusufpur, Jivani, and you go through it, and these names, some names keep on appearing, and they're in a very weird order. And so you begin to, if you stare at it for a while, you begin to wonder, why are these names in this order? Are people being sent back and forth across borders, or is it something to do with their memory? Are they kind of, a little bit kind of, are they jumping back and forth in the way they tend? And then the other thing I suppose to see is that, there's some tiny little village has the same importance in this representation as a massive Karachi. Interviews with the immigration officers, they will ask you, "Kahan se aap aaye? Where have you come from? What was your journey? Why are you here? What happened to you?" There's a series of 4, 5, 6, 7 interviews with different people at different times. And each time you have to tell your story exactly the same. The journey has to be exactly the same. The order in which you tell the story has to be exactly the same. You deviate 1 second from it, you're out. They will say you're lying. Now, we all know when we try to kind of convey something that's difficult for us, that, is emotionally hard, your memory doesn't stick, right? It changes. You find it difficult to remember. Every time you might say things differently. Anyway, memory is always a reconstruction. And so what this image shows is that, that process of asylum, of the asylum system is designed to fail, right? Even if you have the strongest case, you have the most kind of difficult life, you're still not going to get asylum because you're going to get it wrong. And so that's what this particular map is about. So, most people wouldn't call it a map. To me, it's a map because it's saying something about someone's journey and how that then connects to their legal situation within a particular place. So I'm nearly done. I'm just going to finish with the last 2 slides. I'm not going to show too much, but all of this material we put on a kind of digital platform. And one of the things we realized was that the digital platform is a space that absolutely reduces experience. And all of this time we were trying to make experience more embodied, right? So how do you do that? I don't have time to show the platform. All that to say, this is a little snippet. This was something we started, this idea of a patchy globe, where we try to show only some things and not others. We don't pretend that the digital can show you everything. Instead, we show little collages of things, and the website is there. If you go there and you go on the digital platform, you can follow certain narratives through the archive, the big, vast material of interviews and images that we have. And so each time you navigate the website, a different story emerges, and emerges through your interests and the way you interact with it. And that was our way of saying that, there is no one exact story, but there are also lots of stories. And it was our way of bringing a bit of kind of embodied relationality to the digital space, which can be so kind of flattening. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much.
Any questions? I hope there are some. Yeah, please go on.
Why did it's like safe and safe spaces? What inspired you to work on spaces?
Migration, I guess, because I had migrated. So I moved.
Right.
I was. Who?
For online participation, can you repeat the question? Because we cannot hear the questions.
Yes, I am going to do that. I'm actually going to give her a mic so that she can speak loudly.
Yeah, perfect.
Did you decide to work on such unsafe spaces? What inspired you to work on migration? Why?
Okay, so the question is she's still not loud enough. So the question is why she decided to work in such unsafe spaces, and what inspired her to work with migrant communities.
So I was saying migration because I migrated myself. I was born in Pakistan. I was born in the UK. But we moved when I was a few weeks old to England, and then we came back again to Pakistan. We moved to England, to Pakistan when I was a few weeks old, and then we went back to the UK when I was 12. And then I've been coming and going.
Sorry about this.
Oh, it's because it's your phone. And so, I was a diasporic subject myself, and therefore I was interested in diasporas as well. In the beginning, I wanted to work with the Kashmiri community, actually. But then my PhD supervisor, who is a big feminist name, Joyna Petrescu, she was like, don't work on a community that's different from yours, because it will give you a kind of distance, which at the time I was like, why is she saying this? Feminism is all about embodied and relationality and knowing a community and a place well. But in the end, I think she was right, because the relationality that came was from my own neighborhood, because I worked with a community that was diasporic in my neighborhood of London. And so that was how the connection came. Why did I start work in such unsafe spaces? I didn't choose to work in unsafe spaces. It's just that I was interested in people moving from Pakistan to UK, to Europe. And so once you start following that route, you go to certain places. But I think I would say one thing, which is that, by the time I got this big project, I hadn't really worked in Pakistan. I had been in UK, I was studying in UK, I'd done research in UK, and I realized that I didn't really know Pakistan that well. As diaspora people probably think we know, but we don't really. And so partly I was wanting to kind of put myself in positions where I wasn't part of the majority. I'm Punjabi, right? I wanted to be in situations where I was where I really didn't know, so that I wouldn't assume that I knew, because in Lahore, it's easy for me to assume I know, even though I don't, right? But in a place like Balochistan, I am a foreigner as much as anybody else. And so it gives a certain humility, which is sometimes important when you're doing research, to not assume you know everything. Plus, I like taking a few risks. So there's also just that.
That is, what is life without risks? So, any next other question, please? Okay. Okay, she raised her hand first. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, so
the question is that what is the outcome of Kawadar project, and what was the source of funding for that project?
So it was funded by the European Research Council, which is a big funding body of the EU. What's nice about this particular ERC grant is that it's very open. You just write the project you want. And if you're lucky enough to get it, you have 5 years to do whatever you want to do that thing. So it was very open. And they don't come with a lot of strict batch. So the reporting is very nice and light. They just leave you alone. They trust you. They treat you like adults, which is very rare for funding organizations. So that was kind of nice. And what came out of the Go Other project, there's an eFlux article. There's lots of articles. A lot of that material is on the website. There's a book that's coming out. Yes, it's just come back from the designer, so it'll be published in a few months. That has all the work in it, all of the work of the whole project. That would be the main publication. Otherwise, yeah, there's a website or there's a series of articles which you can find from my page at UCL. Zara's published loads of stuff in relation to this. So if you Google the names on the people page, you find all the publications.
Wonderful. Last question.
They're also a network for something, and somewhere along the lines, they are trying to be marginalized and for even men. So, like, what do you think about that?
Okay, so the question is, if I've heard it correctly, that these routes that Nishat identified, for example, on the border of Iran and Pakistan, they are used for smuggling as well. So your question is, how does it affect women of that area? Yeah, so there's human trafficking and smuggling. So does Nishat have any point of view for that?
Well, I think, what is considered illegal is a good question, right? We know from what's happening in the world that international law is nothing to really be too worried about these days, apparently, right? But I think, borders produce illegality, right? So it's not that the people crossing the borders are illegal. It's just that when they cross without the paper, they're considered illegal. This planet is ours. We can go wherever the hell we want, right? So I'm not really sure that I agree with calling those people illegal. Trafficking, actually very little trafficking happens across that border. It's mostly people who are choosing to go. Of course, there's a lot of cruelty by the agents sometimes when people can't pay what they were supposed to pay in order to cross. So it's not all like rosy or anything. So there are very difficult, I agree, very difficult issues wrapped up in this, and which is why we did very long-term ethnography. We also spoke to a lot of agents that are sitting in Gujarat and Gujranwala and stuff to try to understand what were their reasons for, going into this business. And what you realize is that a lot of those people were migrants themselves. They didn't really make it to wherever they were. But what they did learn, what they did get was a knowledge of the border. And that knowledge is incredibly useful because you can use it to essentially help others cross, which means you can use it to make money. And so then it all, of course, goes back down to the difficult situations people are in. Crop yields are going down in agricultural communities. People cannot make a livelihood. What do? They make a livelihood through this. So these are very kind of complicated relationships. As far as women are concerned, I mean, in Go Other, women have quite a lot of freedom, in fact, half the time, not always. So I think the question of women, I don't know, do you want to say something about women? No. Is that what you were? What was the question in relation to women?
Do these guys, communities at risk, the ones who live along these routes?
Is this the question? Oh, sorry. Yes and no is the answer. It's very complicated because, yes, you could say that because people are moving across the border, borders are being securitized, right? That's the given reason to us. We are building fence along this line because we want to stop. And that's where the money is coming from, right? The money is coming from Frontex, from these European agencies to securitize it. Because the reason the border is being securitized is a little bit more complex than that. It is to do with the other forms of smuggling that are also happening. So I think, one of the major questions of the project that is going to come out in the book is how do you make relation between the settled and the unsettled, between the people who are moving and the people who are settled in the border communities, because actually they're always put in opposition to each other. And in fact, a lot of the time their interests overlap. And it's really the other kind of more powerful actors that are causing the issues. So, I'll leave it at that, but it's kind of complicated.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful question. And thank you so much, Nishat, for this very lovely presentation. I personally get to learn a lot, and I'm always very interested in the kind of work you both are doing. So thank you so much for sharing that with us today. And now we will move on to the last presentation of this session before we have to take the break for the Friday prayer and lunch, of course. And after that, we'll have the panel discussion. So the last presentation, I will open that. Yes. So initially it was supposed to be another keynote by Dr. Zahra Hussain. But then after seeing the kind of focus we have for this workshop, she actually suggested, I'm really sorry, my phone is being crazy right now. So I think I should have broadcasted a message. It's time for me. No one should message me at this time, call me at this time. Anyhow, so after seeing the kind of work we are going to do in this workshop, she actually suggested and we agreed that we should reflect upon a studio that we did last year. Three of us, Dr. Zahra, me, and Madam Architect Nabha. Nabha is based in Comsets. Zahra has her own thing. She runs an organization, Lashworth, and I think you know what I do. So we did. Yes.
Can you do the full screen?
Oh yes, I'll do that. Yes.
Thank you.
Is it full screen? Okay.
No, yes, now it is. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So then we decided to reflect upon the studio. What was the objective? Why did we take the initiative? And what were the outcomes? And what were the struggles that we faced? So the studio, and before I start, I would like to invite Dr. Zahra Hussain and architect Nabha Ali Saad to join me here, please. So I will just introduce the studio and then Dr. Zahra will talk about the conceptual underpinning of the studio. So we three started this studio. This was an idea that from WAP's platform, we should do something with the students where we talk about gender and the built environment. And then we all came together. We also had LUMS, City 8 LUMS, that is a very prestigious institute in Pakistan. That was our collaborator as well. Lashworth was our collaborator, Comsets University, and then UT, where the studio was based. It was a vertical studio where fourth year and master students were working together to map some areas of Lahore. So these were the collaborators: Women in Architecture Pakistan, UT, City 8 LUMS, Comsets University, and Lashworth. Now I will ask my colleague to.
Thank you, Maimuna. I hope I'm audible. Okay, thanks a lot, Maimuna, for this. And Nabha will also be speaking with me. I'll just give you a little bit of context on what the studio was about. The studio was hosted at UET, and the objectives were to basically try and understand critically how gender, power, and social identities shape the built environment. And because we also understand that there is very little research that goes into, or critical research that goes into the projects that we do in architecture schools, particularly in the undergraduate program. So, usually we get a topic or a building typology, and then we go on to studying that. So I think the idea here for us was to really sort of go out into the city, use some research methodologies that architects are not really comfortable using. We are very comfortable at our own desks in the design studios, and we're hardly sort of used to going out, talking to people, really understanding what's going on. So I think this was also one of the objectives that we wanted the students to get an understanding of the areas that they are are engaging with. The idea was also to build the ability to design inclusive, equitable, and I think we didn't really get to that point where we were designing these spaces because a lot of time went into really just understanding what's going on. So who are the actors? Who are the stakeholders? What is the space like? How does it shape shifts? How does it change at different times of the day or at different days of the month or the year? So I think a lot of those complications around space or understanding space came up once the students were out in the field and really sort of understanding what's going on. And then I think the third one was to really cultivate participatory and socially responsive design skills. So, even just understanding that what we already know or the way that we're used to designing space is probably not enough or probably not the right approach is being taken. So, just understanding that would be a great step in the right direction. So there was quite a lot of things that were going on within the studio. It was an integrated design studio. So it was, Maimuna sort of designed it vertically in the sense that there were some master students involved as well as fourth-year bachelor students. Then there were a series of workshops that were happening as part of the studio. So one was mapping urban space, which was led by me. And whatever I'll be saying about that would be in continuation to what Dr. Nishad just spoke about as well. And then I think there was a GIS workshop as well. And then there was quite a lot of field work that happened where the students were going out into the field, really sort of understanding what their spaces are like, who the actors are, speaking to them, conducting interviews, conducting surveys, and then coming back and actually the methods that are not working. So they're seeing something, but, hearing something else from the interview. So there was quite a lot of gaps that they actually felt needed attention. Other than that, we, of course, there was studio because there was design development in the sense that I think what we were really focusing on was mapping and really sort of trying to understand how are we visualizing the kind of issues that we're seeing in space. Within that, we also had a guest lecture series where we had talks by national and international practitioners. And then towards the end, we did an exhibition and a panel, which was a public showcase and dialogue within Lahore. So the guest lectures were, of course, Dr. Nishad opened our guest lecture series with her brilliant work. And we had Professor Abdul Malik Simon, who spoke about urban futurities. We had Talushi. We had Mariam Naveed, who works in Islamabad. We had Sidra Poker, who is working on critical ethnographic. Her work is on Ziddi feminist social racial practices. And then we had Nuhan Bassam. So these were basically enriching the kind of ideas that were being explored in the studios and giving students a way of understanding the kind of issues that were coming up within their own sites. So the stages of the projects were basically, trying to understand the urban and social multi-layered and multi-scalar complexity, then, and a layer of interpretations. What have we seen? How are we going to interpret it? How are we going to analyze it? And I think this is where we were struggling a lot with the students that, what are you seeing and what are you how are you, building an argument around it? And then design strategies were proposed. But I think that was only done on the undergraduate level. The master students were more sort of engaged in a deeper research, and they were actually producing at Wall City in Lahore. The other one was Kota Pind, and the third one was Bibi Park Daman, which is a shrine located in Lahore. So maybe you want to say a little bit about your side?
Yeah, so we were working in 3 distinct groups, and each of us was supervising one group. So my group was working in Bhagat area, that is, so for those of you who do not know that old Lahore was a walled city, and within that walled city there were 12 gates, and those so for a long time that whole area is in shambles. It hasn't been restored or protected properly. But now, from last couple of decades, there's a very active engagement of authorities with that area. So a lot of work has been done there. But that whole area has its own very distinct identity, and it has old buildings, it has heritage buildings, it has their own way of living, cultural values, social practices that are that are very unique to those areas. So my group was engaged in that particular area to understand that how the historical layers of that particular spot, that particular gate, is evolved over time, and then how they engage marginalized groups, including women. And then there are a lot of transgender groups living in those areas as well. So that my group particularly focused in the walled city and one gate of the walled city and the pathway that leads towards that gate.
Wonderful, thanks.
So I think it's important at this stage to also identify the reason for us selecting these three typologies was because we were trying to see Lahore, and we have to kind of understand Lahore, that Lahore as a city is not fundamentally focused on one type of, spatial practice or spatial placemaking, like the idea of placemaking, right? Lahore is a city which has a deep-rooted history. Lahore is a city which has deep-rooted cultural practices. It has long historical sites which create a very strong spiritual sense of connectivity between space and place. And then there's the everyday. This is everyday Lahore that we all experience, our mohallas, our areas, our neighborhoods, right? Which don't have these deep-rooted historical ties or spiritual connectivities. It's just another place where people live and have a neighborhood that they interact with. So where Maimuna's was, the historical heart of Lahore, and obviously Zara will speak on hers, but hers was focused on the religious and spiritual part of Lahore. My site was Kotapin, which dealt with the everyday, like of the average Lahori citizen who lives in and this is also part of our everyday in our architecture schools that we have.
We have a cat.
Our cats. Always a cat. Every school of architecture will have a cat walking through their studio. Even mine does. The point is that the varying socio-economic demographics were studied, and Kotapin focused on how the average person, man, woman, child, associated with a very middle-class neighborhood within Lahore.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, I think it was important to point out why we picked up these three sites and just to understand what is the flavor that we're getting from these sites and how are people interacting with this, or what is their sense of belonging with these areas. So these locations were studied through the collaborative studio mapping exercises. Students were put in 3 groups, and then they were supposed to sort of design some research methods, go into the field, try and interact with these sites, read these sites through different sorts of layers, and then they were supposed to develop maps. So I think how we were using maps is in continuation to what Professor Nishat spoke about, that, a map is not something that is just a given. So it's not just a political representation of space. Rather, we were looking at maps as something that becomes a political device in itself, in the way that what are we trying to show through those maps. And I think this is something that we took at least a week or so trying to speak to the students about, discuss with the students about that, how can maps tell very different stories of a particular area, and how they need to sort of engage with maps or this visualization in a manner that they're able to show different stories from those their sites that they're talking about. So I think this was something that was done in a matter of 4 or 5 weeks. They were in the field, they were doing their research, conducting interviews, and then sort of layering that information onto the maps in a certain way. And then, of course, it was not a purely factual description either. It was based on their analysis. It was based on their findings. And I think by the end of it, each group had a series of maps. So I think group 1 had about 30 maps. Group 2 had something like 25 maps. Group 3 also had something like 25 maps. So we had a huge sort of collection of maps that were telling very different stories about the sites. So, if you see the Google map of that space, and then if you see those many representations of that particular area, then you start understanding what is really going on. So the idea was that the layers that we sort of helped students develop in the first couple of weeks was that, you can talk about evolution, you can talk about the characteristics of the particular area, the economics in everyday life. And then I think the most important one was negotiation. So how does the site, they present some challenges or potentials for women, or the way that the women use space. And what are the provocations that will drive your intervention? So this is something that the students were supposed to develop on their own in terms of their own critical analysis or critical reflection of the research that they had done.
So these are the example of 2 maps that were from group 1, Bhati Gate area in the walled city of Lahore. And as we were seeing, they were not the geographical maps. They were observations represented in the form of some kind of physical representation, graphical representation. So the first map here actually talks about women's agency and how women actually in the walled city of Lahore, there are not that many women on the streets, but you see a lot of them on the roofs. So roofs become their places of engagement, the places where they can actually practice their agency. They can do their daily tasks. And other interesting thing that you can notice in this map is that a lot of women who are on streets are with a child. So in our cultural context, particularly in the cultural and social context of the walled city of Lahore, women won't go anywhere alone, because for a woman to have agency is through her child. So when a woman is with her child, she is considered kind of a legitimate woman, like she's a family woman, and no one would be staring at her or looking at her with bad intentions. So that is why a lot of women practice the freedom through their children. And then the second map is again about mobility of women, and then how when they move, they are always questioned. So these are some of the comments that are written in Urdu. And the comments in red are from women, and in blue are from men. And if we can read them, a lot of these comments actually question that why these women are on street. And if they are on street, they have to justify the purpose. And if they don't have a purpose to be on the street, that means that they are not good women. They are not coming from a noble family. So, these kind of questions and these kind of things women have to face every day in their mobility, and they have to negotiate these things through their own ways. As in the first map, women are practicing their agency through their children. So this is that representation in the 2 maps.
Thanks, Mamuna. So I think the site that my group was looking at is a shrine of a religious female figure, and it's called BP Pagaman. And the challenges that my group faced were that, a lot of women already come to this site, and they use this site for different sorts of purposes, and they have a very spiritual attachment with the site. Something that the group found very challenging was that how do you capture spirit, or how do you capture this sense of belonging or attachment in, maps? How do you visualize this? So I think this is something that the group kept struggling with, and, they would come up with different sorts of ways in which they would represent the site in the way that you might not see a lot of people, but, people are elsewhere, but thinking about, this religious figure, or seeking some path through this religious figure. So I think this is something that they struggled with in terms of representing these unseen or immaterial attachments. But I think at the end of the day, they were able to come up with different kinds of maps where, it's sort of said that, space or the comfort of space or all of that doesn't really matter. So all of this collapses when you have a very strong relation with a religious figure or something that brings religion in, then all these, tangible elements don't really matter. So I think this is what they sort of came up with towards the end.
So Kotapind was the area that my students had studied, and the perspective that we went in here with was how women navigate their spaces. What is their everyday life? This is something that I discuss with my own students in the urban theory classes. Okay, that when we look at the city, we have to understand there are varying themes through which the city is actually, running itself, right? And one of the elements or layers that we do categorically sometimes miss out on is the role of women in ensuring that the machine keeps running. We also have an unfortunate habit of negating the fact that not only do men and women exist in our cities, but the cities also have children. And by default, as Mahmoona identified, we have a lot of women when they go out, for their everyday chores or, have to go for some sort of errands or whatever the case may be, they do by and large take their children with them. One of the main reasons, again, is just the fact that one does not have readily available childcare, even though most of us do live in, may live in rather, not do live, but may live in joint family settings where we have extended family members. But there may be some situations where, the woman has no choice but to take her child with her because there's no one else to, look after the child. So what happens is that the child has a completely different understanding of what the city is. And one of the outcomes of this particular group survey was, how do women engage with their spaces? What are their safety nets? How do they, create their own spaces or appropriate spaces for their own uses here? And the second thing that we looked at was, how do the children also appropriate their spaces? A lot of these areas don't have public parks, for example, unfortunately. So then how do children utilize the streets to become spaces of play? Street cricket is a very common phenomena in Pakistan by virtue of the fact that a lot of young children don't have access to those playgrounds where they may have safe spaces. So then children are navigating through traffic. It's like somebody's job to make sure to announce that, a car is coming, so, step to the side. So we had a lot of interesting things coming out of here. We also were able to identify that women are actually we don't give women enough credit in Pakistan either. There are a lot of assumptions that we work with. Like one of the things was, like, for example, there's a woman here on the lower left corner. She's riding a motorbike, right? And this is a very recent phenomenon for Pakistan, especially Lahore, which is considered to be one of the more conservative metropolitan cities in Pakistan, that now, compared to other cities in Pakistan, which have always been considered more progressive, we have women taking more agency with respect to their mobility. So they're no longer completely dependent upon the men in their families to take them somewhere, or on by and large, not very safe public transport systems. And now we've seen this large influx of motorcycles and scooters coming in, where we see a lot more women taking control of how they are able to get from point A to point B. And because of this phenomena, and then there's that question of how to sit on a motorbike. How does a lady sit on a motorbike? I remember when we were in college, a friend of mine was stopped because she, sat astride on a bike when she had to go from college to Anarkali to grab supplies or something. And a traffic police guy stopped. So we all fall down and die. Like, what is it that you're saying? So that dialogue and that conversation has also changed now, because it's not just the scooter which is appropriate now for women to use as a transportation mechanism. It is also the average motorbike where you are compelled to sit astride. So there were many things that came out from here. I don't think we actually have enough time to discuss them. Otherwise, we could go on for a long time.
Yeah, so I think it's already one. So some of the observations that we as studio instructors felt came out of the studio were that, students had a difficulty in understanding the gendered use of space. So particularly recognizing how everyday spatial practices differ across identities and why these differences matter. So they were going in with some preconceived notions. And then, we had to sort of question those as well, that where are these notions coming from? So who did we learn these ideas from? So I think it wasn't just the male students in the class, but even the female students were, coming up with some preconceived notions that we had to sort of question in the beginning. Then the architecture students also have limited experience in social research and human subject engagement. And I think that was also something that was challenging for the students. How do we talk to people? Who do we talk to? What makes enough number of people for the research to be called legitimate? And then, as I said, there were strong preconceived notions and fixed conceptual frames as well, in terms of how do we understand women or how we understand the use of space, etc. Sorry.
Yeah.
And then I think with your group, there was an over-reliance on the physicality of the map, so the GIS and the physical attributes. And it was very hard for one of the groups because I think some of the members were well-versed in GIS and they couldn't really separate themselves from that way of visualizing space. And I think we really had to push them quite a lot to say there are other ways of representing space as well. So for my group, there were challenges in visualizing metaphysical or intangible dimensions such as, belonging, memory, attachment, atmosphere. And this is something that the students really struggle with. How do we show something? And then there were talks about how do we show something through absence, etc. So some very interesting conversations happened around that. And then there was limited understanding of the analytical potential of mapping. So, how can maps actually reveal different kinds of, spatial behaviors or power relations? And then what can you say with those maps? So, making a map is one, but then what sort of other conversations can come out from those maps? So I think these were pretty much the things that came up.
Yeah, so one thing we have noticed, particularly in my group, because they were overall from the beginning, they were doing well. But the thing that they struggled towards the end of it, that they had produced so much that they could not make it understand. They could not understand that the numbers are not as important, but the depth of one map is more important. So, and also the thing that looks good doesn't mean it is good.
Yeah.
So it has to have some very deep-rooted meanings attached to it, and each and everything that you specify or make on a map, it has to have some kind of research behind it, and it has to represent that research in a particular manner. So whatever you are showing, it should not just be like for the sake of showing something. I'm sorry, this keeps on happening. Yeah. So these are the challenges for you as well, because you are going to go to the sites today and then you're going to map tomorrow. So that is why we wanted to
share this.
And the guy who's calling me is from a channel. They want to cover our event.
So maybe you will take this call.
Yes, I called him. He call kiya tha, but then he didn't take my call. Anyhow, so if you have any questions, please go ahead. These two are going to answer. I have to do this.
Yes. Do you have any questions?
How do you think that would have attacking or for the residents and the business as well?
So the question asked is the shrine that was one of the case sites was recently renovated, and how has that affected the local residents' association with the space and the general sense of placemaking that the users have?
So I think that's a very important question. What we found out at the site was that initially there were just 2 trees that people would come and sit against, and that is where the grave marking is as well. But with the shrine, of course, architects come and so they kept the tree and then they built the shrine on top of the trees. So, but in that process, one of the trees died. And that was something that was, of course, sad for the people or the women, especially who come and sit under the tree. So now that sort of relationship has changed in the sense that, you have a dome on top. Otherwise, it was the tree on top. And they sort of sit around it, within it. And the sense of attachment that is with the shrine, of course, is still there, or that place is still there. That has not changed at all. People still come anyway because they would come anyway. And like I said before, what they found out was that comfort or facilities or all of that doesn't really matter. So where you believe in something, that belief is the driving force for you to come and, visit the shrine. So yeah.
I think one of the most difficult aspects of a research-led studio, particularly where mapping is very integral to the process, for students at the undergraduate level is lack of theoretical framing and knowledge. Which is why we encourage you guys to read. We give you readings. We tell you read this, because until you do that, you will not be able to understand how the intersections of certain aspects happen, which create those layers, which will make your maps more viable. That what Maimuna was talking about, it is quality, not quantity, that counts, because superficiality can only be overcome if you are able to make those connections, that how does one aspect impact or influence the other. So when we talk to you about socio-political, cultural, religious, XYZ, it is actually building the layers of your map, which you can do in one map. And that map will actually have a lot more meaning than maybe 5, 6 different maps that you may have created, because you categorically try to define or identify the spatial morphology. Architecture is a language, right? It's a language that only you people who are trained as architects can speak. And this level of layering is another form of language, which will allow you to translate your ideas and your thought process through diagramming. Right. So that is one of the key takeaways that we feel that we should reinforce to students whenever we do undertake an exercise like this again in the future.
Yes.
Hopefully soon.
So we'll be here when you will go for after this. So we're going to have a break now.